And let's do the 4 limitless contemplations. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Semchen damche dewatang dewe jutang den ba jutik, dungal tang dungal chichu tang trawa jutik, dungal mepe dewa tampatang mindrawa jutik, nering chaktang ni tandrawe tang nung chempola ne pa jutik. So, tonight we are going to do finding the balance within so that wisdom can reign. Wisdom reigns. And I decided that when I looked at the word reign, that we should use the 2 words reign. 1, R-E-I-G-N, when wisdom reigns over us, and 2, wisdom reigns when it reigns all over you. And I'm going to take various teachings from Akon Rinpoche and on finding the balance, and on Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche on the wisdom, and put them all together with my own stuff and see how we get along. Maybe we can have 2 sessions on this because I really think it's important. So I want to start with 3 little stories, well, 2 actually, and then I'll see about the 3rd one. But this is a very important story, this little one, and it goes like this. Once a man found that his axe was missing and suspected his neighbor's son of having taken it. Observing the youth walking around, the man was convinced that his was the walk of a thief. The youth looked like a thief and talked like a thief, and everything he did pointed to him having stolen the axe. Then one day, the man happened to find his missing axe. And after that, he noticed his neighbor's son wasn't behaving like a thief anymore. When you look at that, it's such an important story because, I mean, it's how we see things, okay? When we haven't got balance inside us and when we haven't got wisdom inside us, we see things in a really distorted manner. And so we really believe what we see, and most of it is just a lot of jargon and a lot of rubbish, and it's all temporary, transient anyway, and it's very important. And the second one is called, is the story of one day, once upon a time in a monastery, a new monk took a vow of silence. He agreed, okay, he's back now. He agreed to the tradition in this particular monastery of saying only 2 words every 10 years. Can you imagine me in a monastery saying 2 words every 10 years? Okay. After the first years had gone by, the monk was summoned into the abbot's office. The abbot nodded and the monk said, "Lousy food." Okay. And he then turned to go back into his room, only 2 words per 10 years. He then turned to go back. After 20 years, when he came back to the abbot, except this time he didn't say lousy food, he said, "Bed's hard." Okay. And then he returned to his room. At the 30-year mark, the monk frowned and said, "Place stinks." And he stomped back into his room. Finally, on his 40th anniversary in the monastery, the monk stormed into the abbot's office and shouted his 2 words, "I quit." The abbot simply looked at him and said, "Well, that's no wonder. You've been complaining ever since you got here." So when you look at that, it's also very, very, very appropriate to this subject, because imagine what you've got to do when you've got those 2 words. I mean, what you would do if you were in that position. And then the third thing I want to do is, can you do that cartoon, Fee? Is it possible? Okay, this is Sally and Linus in the Small Society, and she goes like this. I hate everything. I hate the whole world. And he's lying in his little chair. He says, I thought you had inner peace. She says, I do, but I still have outer obnoxiousness. Okay, so those are my little stories to set the tone. And what I felt a lot of times when I was on this trip was the one thing that I'm really glad about getting older is that I've definitely improved a few steps in allowing a teeny more bit of wisdom regarding everything to abound in everything that I have to face in life. Like I look at when I'm walking in the streets of London and people are on their phones. Okay, they're walking and on their phones. And I was watching this girl. She was on her phone. I just happened to be watching her and she tripped. And, there was something in the road and she tripped. She didn't fall, thank goodness, but she tripped and got a terrible fright and then went on. But I thought, how stupid it is that people are walking in the street, looking at their phones and are on their phones all the time in restaurants everywhere. And you really, and I, with a little bit of wisdom, I'm looking exactly where I'm going on the pavement. I'm looking at every bump that there is because I don't want to fall. And I thought, it's such an amazing thing how when you get older, you just don't get so panicked and so excitable about things and so crazy about things when the wisdom comes in. And what I've realized is that the wisdom, when we look at it from a Buddhist perspective, is not what my mother taught me as her mother taught her. This was wisdom. What my mother taught me was wisdom according to the relative world, the world of samsara, and how to negotiate samsara in a wise way, or what she thought was a wise way. And that was how she was taught. It's important to negotiate samsara in a wise way, but it's not what we are learning in Buddhism. The ultimate wisdom is already in us, and to let go of most of the things that we've believed in by our conditioning, by our families, by our culture, by our social milieu, and everything else is really, really very, very, very difficult. And that's why I told you those stories, because how we've been trained is how we live, but it's not who we are, and it's not with wisdom, and it's definitely not by balancing ourselves. And when we allow thinking, which is the main tool of our human mind, to actually, when we allow thinking to dissolve, and we just take a leap out of the box. Now, Dzongsa Khyentse talks a lot about out-of-the-box thinking, not thinking like everybody else, but let's absolutely face facts that out-of-the-box thinking means you're not going to be liked by a lot of people, and you're definitely not going to be agreed with by a lot of people, because even about our practice, our daily practice, our Buddhism, our daily lives, how do we balance ourselves so that wisdom can actually reign, or either reign, is a different process to being able to leap to a different view. Now, I've done this lots of times in my life, leapt to a different view and looked at it. And I think of all the time when I don't think it out, work it out, plan it out, when I don't, then suddenly something changes, because the something called the wisdom is already in you. And as soon as you surrender and stop that process of the human mind from going on and on and on and get into balance, then the wisdoms can happen. Now, it's a very interesting thing, because in one of my prayers that I do, I like to do it on the 100 deities and everything. And in that prayer, it's such an interesting thing, because what you ask for is, in the one part of the prayer, for example, you ask for each of the wisdoms, but you ask for mirror-like wisdom to manifest by dissolving your anger, hatred, and aggression. And at the same time that you do that, you actually see the hell realm of the mind dissolving. And at that absolute given point, your consciousness transforms, and you've got this different primordial consciousness ruling you. So I say it every day that I want that, for example, that mirror-like wisdom, you could do it with all the wisdom, so that the hell realm can dissolve, so that the consciousness can turn the ordinary consciousness of the way we perceive things, like the little thief of the boy. He's now he's now no longer a thief when we look at him, because we have figured out whatever we are. And when we do that, it's the most amazing, amazing thing, because you actually feel in your being that transformation. I mean, when you're living in your ordinary consciousness, you're living in your ordinary consciousness. It's the most unbelievable thing, because you're living with that absolute impure perception. So because the axe was missing, the guy saw the neighbor's son as a thief. Now think about how many people at work you see as this, as that, as the other, as being impossible, as all this. But meanwhile, that's what Ekon Rinpoche teaches when he teaches the balance. We've got to find that balance so that all the ordinary mind can transform. And if we define the word balance, it's a state of, this is how it's defined, a state of equilibrium or parity, characterized by the cancellation of all forces by equal opposing forces. Now, what does that mean? It means inside us, there are always opposing forces. Should I do this? Or should I do that? Or should I go left? Or should I go right? There are always these opposing forces. So what it's saying is, when you cancel all those forces so that you've got equal taste, so it doesn't matter if you go into a negative state, doesn't really matter. It's like we've got inside us this tug of war all the time. I want to do my practice, but I've got to do this. I want to do that, but I've got to do that. We've got this tug of war of these opposing forces, okay? And a tug of war should end when the opposing sides say, okay, we're ending it, we're putting down the rope. We're not pulling the rope anymore. If one side puts the rope down, there's no more tug of war. And yet, if you watch a tug of war, both sides will go on and on until they win. Now think of this tug of war going on inside you as you develop awakening and you coming into your Buddha nature, but the human conditioned intellectual part of the mind never surrenders the tug of war to the wisdom side. And it's like negative emotions always seem to win. I'll throw this open so you can argue with me if you think differently. And Ekon Rinpoche, in his book, Restoring the Balance, says, with balancing, now listen carefully, with balancing, we don't work with a defined goal in view. Rather, we train ourselves to learn from the process of living. So what he's saying here is really, and I'm going to give it to you in a lot of detail, the minute we say, this is how I'm going to balance myself, we are already working against this true process of allowing life to balance you. And how does life balance you? It balances you when the already existing wisdoms within manifest naturally, instead of wearing ourselves out trying to find an ideal world. Like I looked tonight and I'd got so many messages from people that were having load shedding that couldn't be there. And then inside me, I felt despondent. I thought, I've come home and now people aren't around. And the opposing force in me, the wisdom force in me, said, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if one person is there. It's not very important. What matters is that you are giving of you what wisdom you have, and that will go out to all the people that are there. It's not about my despondency when everybody isn't back or when everybody's having load shedding. Do you all understand that? Maybe you want to debate it with me, because I just want to say one thing, then I'll throw it open. Ekong Rinpoche says, and he was so wise, he says, better to train the mind to accept things as they are. Then we may discover that the solutions to our problems have been there all the time. We may discover that. That's the wisdom within. The actual problem has arisen because we're out of balance. And he says balancing is not a goal-orientated activity. We train ourselves to learn from the process of living. So the process of living throws at us daggers and all kinds of things, and we're observing it. There's no permanence. There's no anything. Even if things were going absolutely beautifully, there would be suffering. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment. It's a very subtle process, this, finding the balance and then letting wisdom reign. Because for too long, we've listened to what our mothers said. If this happens to you, do this. This is the way you negotiate. This is the way you do this. This is the way you do that. And we do it. And there's a tug of war when we begin to learn another way. What do you feel about what I'm saying? Any comments? And it happens every minute of your life. You get a curveball thrown at you, and then you get despondent. I know, or someone doesn't appreciate what you've done, or something like that happens, and you get extremely despondent. And then the tug of war starts, because the true nature, the wisdom says, but it's all just how it has to be. And the other part of you says, no, I want it to be like this. And the tug of war goes on and on and on, and there's no balance in you.
I know.
Please, Eugene, go for it.
So I just got load shedding, so that's why you just see the vineyards. So I listened to a Ramdas podcast, and one of the ladies that interpreted the lesson said when she started Buddhism, like she wanted to have these great awakened moments of enlightenment and harmony and universal alignment and magic and rainbows and unicorns and dragons and glitter. But then the person said to her, where you are is exactly where you need to be, and start where you are. And I think so often we want things to be a certain way, but like the ordinary is also where you can make an impact, and that is exactly the conditions and reality that is surrounded you, so that you can make an impact with that person or in that situation and just elevate them. So last night, I joined the Cape Town Kagyus have a meditation hour, so I joined that. So the one lady also said that like what's it, Akong Rinpoche. So teachings from way back in the 80s. He said, the ordinary life is the same as the ultimate expression of everything. So in the ordinary, there is the ultimate. So like not running away from the reality is a key thing, but it's very hard because I'm a big dreamer and fantasizer myself. So I always try to see things in a
beautifully and wonderfully, and
yeah,
this
yeah.
is
So
how
and highly and achieve and then motivate yourself and that kind of stuff. But
oh,
sometimes it's just really good to also know that it's okay that things are crappy. And in the crappy, you actually get to do more. And actually, you get to
absolutely.
release karma quicker if you can see it for what it really is. But it's only your ego that makes it negative.
Absolutely. I agree with every single word you're saying. And Akon Rinpoche says we've lost the freedom simply to be. He says we exist by statistics, labels, and paper identity. And I laugh because he says without a birth certificate, we are not regarded as alive. So if you've lost your birth certificate, you are not alive, no matter if you are alive, but you're not alive. Then he says, if we have a birth certificate, we also have to have a death certificate. Without a death certificate, although we are dead, we still exist. Okay, so I mean, you just think of the absurdity of it. We still exist. That's why he says our lives are called shadow lives, living with bureaucracy, especially in our country, living with the dominant human part of the mind. He says, what's freedom? And he says, as a teenager, we get so mad with our parents' restrictions and everything else. And we think, I want to move out. I'm going to move out as soon as I can, and then I'll be absolutely free. He says, then they move out and they have to rent a flat. So they have to pay. So now they haven't got freedom again. So freedom always looks like it's over there, but it's actually in here, just as he said. And he says, he talks about Milarepa. Now, Milarepa, I always think of who was this great Kaju master. When I always tell you the story when his sister came to visit from his, what's the soup called again? He had the soup, I can't think of the name right now. But
the nettle soup now.
Nettle soup, he turned completely green and he had no clothes. And when his sister, they'd come from quite an okay family and everything, when she saw him, this skinny little green ghost, she said to him, oh my goodness, you can still teach the Dharma. Get out of this cave. You've got lots of people that will follow you. Let them sit, let them dress you, be a king and teach people like that. And he said, I don't want to. I love it here and I'm as free as anything. And he said, I don't want to. And he is a Buddha and we aren't, okay? And she was so ashamed of him. And Akon Rinpoche says, in former times, there were no clocks. You ate when you felt hungry. There were no prearranged times. I mean, wouldn't that be a wonderful world if you could get up when you felt like getting up, middle of the night, morning, whenever it was, late or whatever. He says we're ruled by a rigid structure of society and we're ruled by technology. And are we better people? Will artificial intelligence make a better world? I tell you, I heard Christiana Amanapur showing an AI news reader. Okay, it was quite scary. She was an Indian woman. Okay, and she said, now we'll be having the news. and this is the latest news, and this is what's happened, and that's what's happened. And she read it, and I thought, am I dreaming? This is a robot giving the news, okay? And you think about it. I mean, has it made people better? When I travel around the world and I see people, I mean, whatever these kids do, even the little ones, it's tick, 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 tick. I mean, if you round the corner from a restaurant, and the restaurant, you don't know if you're going to still get in, or you're too late for the restaurant, or you need to know the menu, tick, 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 and it all comes up on your phone. I mean, I haven't a clue how to do that. We've still got 1 kilometer to walk, and the restaurant is full, and all the information comes up. I mean, has it balanced us? Has it made us better? I just know when I was a child, we looked up in an encyclopedia. Now, of course, advanced knowledge is really a blessing in many ways. But what if it tips over? What if the world is controlled by artificial intelligence? Is there going to be any balance? And it's very, very interesting, because true freedom is only within. It's not dependent on anyone or anything. Now, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, I'm going between the two articles, he speaks of the Kagyu Masters and of Milarepa and of Tilopa. And Tilopa hit Naropa over the head with a shoe, and he says a shoe brought the wisdom out. Okay, that was wonderful. But he said that Tilopa, he gave Tilopa's work during the day. Just let me find it for you. He said that Tilopa, during the day, okay, he said, first of all, that Milarepa is regarded as one of the greatest Mahasiddhis in Tibet. This little green monster is regarded as one of the greatest siddhis. And he says, having a realized being in our lives is the biggest source of relief from mind suffering, and you can trust them. They present themselves, he says, in different forms, from barefoot to elaborate. And then he goes on to really talk about Tilopa. Now, if you look at Tilopa's life, and Tilopa was this great master, okay, he was a Mahasiddhi who then taught Naropa, who then taught Milarepa. Okay, so Milarepa was in that line. The highest one was Tilopa. He never had a human teacher. And like once when Naropa saw Tilopa eating fish, he said, how can you eat a sentient being? And so Tilopa said, okay. He regurgitated the fish, got it whole, and threw it back into the water. I mean, what he was actually doing, the other one couldn't see, because he was eating the fish to actually transform the fish into a better and higher form. That's what he was doing. So when he said, how can you eat a fish? It's against all the rules. He just regurgitated and put it down. But in the day, he ground sesame seeds. That's what he did to get the oil, the sesame oil. I'm sure now we get sesame oil from machinery, but he sat with a little thing like this, grinding the sesame seeds on and on and on and on all day to get the oil out. Now, when you look at it, it's fascinating, because the patient, what was he doing while he was grinding sesame seeds? Was he maybe giving a message to us? I mean, Dzongsa talks about this in his wisdom. He said, was he maybe giving a message to us that if you persevere and if you really work hard, you will extract the essence out of your life? Now, we do it 3 times and the oil isn't there and we've given up. Or we did this practice twice and nothing happened. We didn't see stars and rainbows, as Eugene said, so we gave it up. You just think about even the mistakes you make. You make a mistake and you do it again and again, and then you give it up completely. We've got to look during the day, he ground sesame seeds. At night, he was a pimp. He took men to prostitutes That's what his night job was. So he had a day job and a night job. Now, when people hear about this, Zongsa says, what? He worked with prostitutes and he took men to go to women? Is that what he did? Now, you can judge that. That's what I started with my story, that the guy thought his neighbor's son was a thief. We don't know what he was doing. Maybe he was thinking out of the box. Maybe because he became a Buddha, or he already was a Buddha, and we aren't. So our judgment, our value judgment, and he says, it's not the politically correct way of life, but one has to listen to their songs and instructions. The sesame seed doesn't remotely resemble oil, but with profound grinding, we can get oil. And the same with us. We can get there. We don't look like a Buddha, but with profound causes and conditions, we can get awakened. And that's what he said in his wisdom. And he said, the solution is inseparable from the problem. The problem is the solution, and vice versa. And he says, we are like people that have ice in our hands. We've got ice in our hands. He says, and we're so thirsty. We need to drink. We're desperate to drink, but we don't even realize that if we relax for a minute or two, the ice will melt into water. The ice is the water we're searching for, the wisdom, and it's right in our hands. But we say, I haven't got anything to drink, because we can't chill. We can't think out of the box. We can't move forwards. I think that's fascinating. Maybe anybody wants to comment or ask something, because there's so much that he teaches. Okay, put up your hands if you want to say anything, please. But the best way, Ekon Rinpoche says, of introducing balance into our lives is to respect the uniqueness of each individual. He says we have to stop clinging to our habit patterns and our conditioning, because they limit us. And even if we get a sense of security from these, give up the masks. And when Zongsa was asked about what does a sacred outlook mean, what is a sacred outlook, he said, a sacred outlook really means seeing the pure nature of every sentient being, no matter how evil they seem, or no matter how much chaos they seem to be creating. We are able to see the ultimate pure side. It's very important, that. And how do we balance ourselves internally and allow the wisdom to reign? The wisdom is already there, but covered over by the skandhas, your form, your feelings, your perceptions, your habits, your ordinary consciousness. So when we start knowing that that ordinary consciousness is not the truth, when we know it's not the truth, and we really open up and allow it. So when we see the hatred and anger, or the envy and jealousy, or the passions, the craving and attachment, when we see it for what it is, the wisdom is already there. The solution is there in the problem. Sense or not sense. But just like you said, go for it, Eugene, please. Since you're the only one talking. Please.
So, like, I don't know, these days I'm like really getting more and more interested in vibrational frequencies and stuff. So, and I think it's really around you. So like you said, in the problem is your solution. And I think the reason why that is because there is no good or bad. It's all just a formation. It's all just a vibration, or like the Prajna Paramitra. Emptiness is form, form is emptiness, uh, like all of that kind of stuff. So if you look down into the molecular level of things, there isn't anything there. It's just space, that primordial, and that's where all of that primordial wisdom resides. And it's within us as well, in all these bones and cells and flesh and this whole meat sack that you inhabit. Within that, there is that space as well, which we call Buddhahood and that primordial wisdom. It's just we're so trapped in the physicality of everything and in the habit formations and the alaya consciousness. And
The thing is, Eugene, you're talking about it, but how do you get untrapped? That's what Ekong Rinpoche is saying, and that's what Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche is saying. How do we get untrapped? Because what you're saying is so valid, but we all say it and say it and say it and don't do anything about it. I think that you've got to keep training. You've got to keep training to be able to understand it until one day it starts happening of its own accord. And I think we don't do enough training. I really can say to you that I train in the wisdoms several times a day, every day. So every day I'm training in those wisdoms. I'm looking and seeing, even when I'm watching a person who's down and depressed and can't move and everything, even then, I'm training in looking at what am I seeing? What is the real thing I'm seeing here in the negative emotion? We've got to train and condition ourselves. It's so important because we were once like that. And then we moved away, we moved away, we moved away, we moved away. We conditioned ourselves and we conditioned ourselves and we used the human part of the mind. And now it's so long after. It's so long after. It's so difficult to do that. That's the point. And it's so difficult that we don't do it. So you've got to train in it over and over and over again. Avril, I want to know what you think. Because you were saying to me, you at a point where you want to change something. What do you think of that? You're not answering. Okay. But what's important, what's really, really important is that Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche says the true nature is called the ordinary mind. So the ordinary mind is really the true nature. And he says it's called the ground luminous emptiness. It's always there. And that's why they call it the ordinary mind. I find it so difficult when they call it the ordinary mind, because my mind wants to say that's a higher mind. That's a higher consciousness. It's not a higher consciousness. It's actually really your ordinary mind that you have. It's just covered over by all the other things and by all our experiences. But it's actually called your ordinary mind. Your ordinary mind knows the wisdoms. It's so important to understand this, because you've just got to retrain it. You've got to absolutely retrain it. And I told you that expression the Buddha said. He said when he was attacked by all the demons, he said, I've done my deed and I cast off my baggage. Can you ever say that? Are you going to say that in this life? I've done my deed and I cast off the baggage. I'm sick of the baggage. I'm sick to death of the baggage. I really, really am. Now,
Dilgo Khyentse, he says, like, in our lifetimes, it's like we're climbing on a mountain path and like to run along the edge of the mountain path as you climb the mountain.
yeah.
And that's how we live our lives. We like to be on the edge. We don't like to commit fully to the path. We just don't want to fall off. So we kind of like stay on the edge because it's comfortable and we're still kind of attached to the habit formation.
But all of you who are really on this journey, I mean, even you, Iga, who are starting and you've got your religion and how you feel about everything, I really respect that. But what's important is that all of this, it relates to all religions. You know, it's not that you know, the practices in Buddhism help you to actually be able to understand this. Now, I want to go in depth what Akon Rinpoche said about finding the balance when there's this full tug of war. But let's do a meditation. Let's do one of Guru Rinpoche's meditations. So get yourself into a lovely state, beautiful. The evening is hot here. It's unbelievable, too hot. But I want you to just get yourself in a state of just total relaxation. And I'm going to give you Guru Rinpoche's pith. It's called the Essence of Butter Pith Instructions for Meditation that he gave to Yeshe Tsogyal, his consort. And so I just want you to sit in absolute balance, and I'm going to give you his instructions. So they go like this. Devoted consort, listen to me. Even though there are many profound pith instructions for the body, just leave the body comfortably at ease. Everything is contained in that. Your breathing, your body is just comfortable and at ease. If it's not, then allow it to get comfortable and at ease. Even though he said there are many pith instructions for controlling the vital energies, such as mantra recitation and others, be like a mute, free from speaking. Everything is contained in that. So your speaking is not your inner speaking. If that inner speaking is going on, just let it be. Be like a mute. Even though there are many pith instructions for the mind, such as holding, loosening, creating, gathering, drawing in, and others, in the ease of one's own uncontrived nature that settles naturally. Everything is contained in that. So nothing to do, nowhere to go. Just allow your body to be at ease. Allow all the speech to stop. When it comes inside, like you're saying, what's she going on about? Stop it. Just be absolutely mute. And your mind, just let it be. Uncontrived, just natural. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. Just natural body, speech, and mind. Stay just like that. Now, if you would do that a couple of times a day, just put the body at ease, put the speech at ease, put the mind at ease, be in a natural state. If you did that even for 5 minutes, a few times a day, you'd start training that mind to be able to be open and see what there is to see. You really, really would be able to do that. And so do that often, really, really often. I think it's very, very important that you do that and that you do that often. So let's look at the meaning of balancing, the meaning that Ekong Rinpoche gives of balancing. So he says that balancing is called, first of all, he says, according to Tibetan medicine, balancing can be achieved with absolutely anything we might need. Everything is considered as being potentially healing and beneficial if we are, number one, open-minded, and number two, we have a clear understanding. Now, we don't always have a clear understanding. But if you just did the meditation I just did, when you're not sure, when the tug of war is going on, you would get a clear understanding. He says balancing is to do with simplicity, how to develop more wisdom, how to face problems rather than fight, solve them, or run away from them. He says we must realize that it does take a little bit of effort. It's a process and not instant coffee. It's not instant coffee. And he says the Tibetan word for balancing is called sowa, S-O-W-A. And there are two meanings to the word sowa. One is healing and repairing the damage. And two is we have a weakness in our body or speech or mind. We repair it through understanding. In other words, we identify the weakness that we have. We identify it, we face it, and then we repair it through understanding. He says this process is called balancing or sowa, is unique to each person. We have to realize that each person's process of balancing is completely different. So I can't tell you, I can maybe advise you on how you could get more balance, but I can't tell you because you've got to have your karmic imprints, your habits, your conditioning, your culture. So when I'm trying to balance somebody, I must take into account their culture. I can't give them, I think in the Jewish culture, we have a particular way about us that we understand each other, we understand jokes. Same with most cultures, with Tibetans, with Eastern Europeans, with whoever you are. But when you're trying to help somebody to get their balance, you've got to take into account their karmic imprints, their culture, their situation. It can be very, very slow process to get people to balance. Like I was trying to balance somebody today who was in a very, very, very low state. And I said to this person, please accept your low state. Yes, you are depressed. Yes, you are in a state that isn't very easy to be with. But try to accept it. Try not to get out of it and become superwoman that you are. Because the balance, it comes into understanding the thing you're going through at that particular moment. And balancing has a twofold benefit, says Ekong Rinpoche. It will heal what needs to be healed, and it will protect against a future wound and prevent future harm and imbalance. So he says, things change all the time, and we need to find the balance in the change. So like, yes, you are low. Yes, you aren't able to function like you normally are, but that's okay. That's okay. Now stop in that low state trying to plan how you should be, what you should be doing when you're in a higher state, because that is not allowing the balance to take place. If you can keep yourself at that level for a while, and when the negative thoughts come, try and look at them deeply, but don't engage and fixate on them, then they will pass. And soon, in a natural way, you will be able to get out of it. Now, he says, all aspects are a natural process. Talking, sitting, sleeping, working, from morning to night, we balance, and it's a natural process. He says, now take, for example, food. If you look at yin and yang food, you see that the one balances the other. So if you have a lot of yin foods, like fruit, sugar, lighter foods, then you might crave the yang food, which would be like meaty or more substance kind of things. Your body will tell you. He says, if you've had a lot of savory food, your body will want sweet things. He said, because the sweet things is to balance. So your body will tell you what you're needing. Unfortunately, what we do is, when our body tells us it might need a little bit of sugar or something like that, if we take a chocolate, we eat the whole chocolate because that's what we feel like doing, which is not how you balance. You balance because your body says it needs something sweet. Then you should be able to go to the chocolate, take a piece, eat it, and the balance will be there by itself. Now, exactly the same emotionally, when someone says, you know what, I've been crying and crying and crying and crying. Enough now. I need some light distraction, some humor. I need, I've been so anxious or tense. I need some relaxation. Your body will tell you when it's enough. You can't say to a bereaved person, it's enough crying. I was just recently watching a bereaved person who was on the go all the time. And it frightened me a little bit, because in order to balance yourself, you need to go through the bereavement and the grief and come out of it, and your body balances it out. Your emotions balance out. We do it naturally, like socially. People might say, oh, I've had kids all day. I need some adult company. You balance it out. Or whatever it is, you will find the balance. It will come to you very clearly and very naturally. And it's a very important process that you watch it and you actually allow it to correct itself. Now, spiritually, we have to be very, very cautious, because we say, how do I balance my earthly life with my spiritual life? Now, let me tell you what Ekong Rinpoche says about that. He says, how do we balance our life in samsara with what we're supposed to be here doing, and the spiritual life where we can truly see who we are? And Ekong Rinpoche says, I hear people saying they need to balance their spiritual life with life in samsara. He says, now you need to be careful with this. He says, because samsara, your earthly life, is the cloud, the illusion. He says, do we need to balance with the illusion that will change sooner or later? That's the habit. So when people say, I haven't got time to do any practice, okay, I'm so busy, I'm making a living. If I don't make a living, I won't be able to do anything. They say, how am I going to, how will I find the middle way? Do we really want a middle way? Yes, we do have to cope with samsara. But can we cope with samsara while our mind is in a natural Buddha state? Or do we forget about that when we go into our daily life. And then when we come out of it, we now go back to that life. What do we do and how do we do it? And are we actually balancing? Do we need to balance an illusion, a cloud, a samsara? I'm asking you these questions. You need to answer them for me. How do you do it? How do you do it? Well, while you're thinking about that question, I'm going to read you this beautiful poem. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read you. It's called The Paradoxes of Our Age, just to give you a thing further of what I'm saying. It says in this little article, we have taller buildings, but shorter tempers, wider freeways, but narrower viewpoints. We spend more, but have less. We buy more, but enjoy it less. We have bigger houses and smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees, but less common sense, more knowledge, but less judgment, more experts, but more problems, more medicine, but less wellness. Should I go on? We spend too recklessly, laugh too little, drive too fast, get too angry too quickly, stay up too late, get up too tired, read too seldom, watch TV too much, and pray too seldom. We've multiplied our possessions, but reduced our values. We talk too much, love too seldom, and lie too often. We've learned how to make a living, but not a life. We've added years to life, not life to years. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. I mean, it just goes on and on. We've conquered outer space, but not inner space. We've done larger things, but not better things. We've cleaned up the air, but polluted the soul. We've split the atom, but not our prejudice. We write more, but learn less. Plan more, but accomplish less. We've learned to rush, but not to wait. We have higher incomes, but lower morals, more food, but less appeasement, more acquaintances, but fewer friends, more effort, but less success. And on and on and on. I don't have to read you anymore. He says it's a day of quick trips, disposable diapers, throwaway morality, one-night stands, overweight bodies, and pills that do everything from cheer to quiet to kill. It is time when there is so much in the show window and nothing in the stockroom. Indeed, it's all true. Think about it and read it again. There's still another whole lot, but I won't read them to you. So, the balance. How do we balance our spiritual life with our physical earthly life? Any answers, any solutions? Fiona, what do you think?
I think it basically is to actually integrate the stuff very slowly, the little small practices throughout the day. Yes, it's good to sit on the cushion, but I think the best thing to do is, for example, just to be aware, maybe have like a sticker on your let's say your laptop screen or your computer screen. And every time if it's just an ordinary plain post-it note, just look at it and think awareness. Where am I? What am I doing? Awareness, 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 that sort of thing, that sort of focus. Just pausing even for 1 minute or 2 minutes to look at where you are, what you're doing, be more present in your body. Perhaps use your breathing as something to these are the sort of things I think that are most helpful for somebody who's got too much to do, and you cannot always, on a daily basis, spend time sitting, doing formal meditation. I mean, I personally find it helpful to do these sort of things. I mean, I've got a very long way to go in terms of these practices, but I do find that does actually help, is to see it, look for a trigger to begin with, to just bring yourself back to yourself all the time. and then eventually
Back to yourself, back to your true nature, back to
that's
your,
it. Yes, that's what I'm trying. Yeah. You actually rest in the awareness, that sense of awareness. So that's the sense of your true nature. But it takes, I find it takes a lot of those bringing yourself, centering yourself, but using those sort of prompts, if I can put it that way, to center, or you can set an alarm or whatever it might be.
very helpful what you're saying. Very, very helpful. I really like it because, you know, this little meditation that I just did now, I mean, I promise you, when you take a tea break from what you're doing, when you just have a 1-minute break, which everybody has, if you sit and you just sit, nobody knows you're meditating, you're sitting, you might even have your computer on so nobody can see you not looking at it. But if you just sit and ease the body, ease the speech, ease the mind for 1 minute when you're at work, you're right there. You see, the whole thing that Ekong Rinpoche is trying to say in restoring the balance, and when we've looked at all his stuff, then I want to look at how wisdom can reign. I mean, they're both interdependent, both of these things. And that's why I've taken these 2 articles, and I'm not going to rush through it. We can carry on with it next time. But what he's saying is, be careful when you say, I must have a balance between my spiritual life and my work life. If we look at our daily life and our spiritual life, the spiritual life is a little breadcrumb in your loaf of bread. Okay, it's very minimal. And I'm not saying I respect people that do hours and hours of practice. I really respect them very much. And I think if they do it with a beautiful devotion, they are going to get places, there's no doubt. Because the practices, like James Lowe says, the tantric practice, the doing of the deity practice, is actually a model for your life. Because if you ask yourself, who am I? Who am I? If I say to you, I am Melanie, but who's Melanie? This is just one tiny fragment of all the beings that I've been, of all the identities that I've had, of everything. And even if you take it in this life, if I look at Melanie in this life, I know that within my own self, I am totally changed from the person I used to be. Even if I react sometimes in a lot of ways inwardly, I really, really, really have changed so much that this Melanie that might be seen by other people as the old Melanie is not who I really am. And so it's really important when you're restoring the balance to understand that the balance is not about self, because yourself, you are changing every minute. You are an illusion. What you were yesterday, you're not today. You suddenly get sick and then everything changes in your life. So therefore, finding the balance is finding out the true nature, who you really are, where the wisdoms naturally are, where the balance naturally is, waiting sometimes. Because sometimes you need to wait a bit for the balance to come, but we are not patient. We are critical of ourselves. It's not fair, because if in your upbringing, you've always been brought up in a particular way, in a particular style, in a particular habit, how can it be that you suddenly change all of this? You can't. And so many times now when I was overseas, I thought to myself, it's unbelievable when I'm listening to what people think and how they behave and how they are and how they see you and how you see them. There's no balance and there's no wisdom. It's just your perception of them, and that is not how we help somebody to balance. we have to take in account what they really are. And, you know, honestly, I mean, the wisdom in us knows how to do this in a natural way, but it's mainly attachment. It's not so much the conditioning, but our attachment to conditioning. Like many times of the things my husband and he's sitting here, looked at in London, you know, could we ever change our lives? Could we ever go there? Would we be able to? And I kept saying to him, don't go in with a rigid mind with all your ideas. Open out to many possibilities, because your true nature knows, it knows what you need and what you're going to require. If you live there, if you live here, whatever it is that you need to do as you get older. And it's all inside, but we've got no patience, and our attachment to our conditionings. If we ponder how much attachment we have to so many things in our lives, in Zongsa's Reign of Wisdom, he tells us about the attachment that we have. All the beauty we have in our luminous, empty beings is made coarse by our attachment to the human part of the mind, which is attached and entangled to the body. Our shape, our clothing, our food, our money, our fame, our status, our wealth, our houses, our careers, our situation. Should we emigrate? Should we not? We never quite get, as both Akong Rinpoche and Zongsa Khyentse Rinpoche say, we never quite get that we're in the right place at the right time, perfect to work out our particular lifetime and get it balanced out. Isn't that an amazing thought? We're in the right place at the right time, perfect to work out our lives. So I was saying to somebody, yes, this situation with this child is really, really is very difficult and very painful. But it's the right situation for that child, because of that child's conditioning in the past and that child's karma and that child's situation. It's the right circumstance. So we've got to be able to see who we are and balance it out by keeping the focus all the time on our true natures. Now, if I honestly ask all of you, how much time in a day do you commit yourself totally to do what you're doing in your lives or your job or whatever, with no recognition of the wisdom part of you balancing out what you're doing in this daily mundane life? And this is so important. Yesterday, when I was doing the talk, which a few of you were there, I said we've got to look at the mundane life, and we've got to be able to be in the mundane life, but use the compassion. So I think I might have told you this example that Zongsa Khyentse Rinpoche says, if you build a sandcastle with a child, and that's in samsara, and a sandcastle is mostly what we're building, but let's say you actually build a physical sandcastle in the sand, and now the sea comes and it washes the sandcastle away. Now we can take that equation to whatever you're doing in life, and a flood comes and it washes away. I mean, I was looking at the floods here and the floods there and the floods everywhere, washes everything away. He says, if you're in samsara with the child and the sandcastle washes away, you might even cry with the child. You might even say, oh, this is so sad after all our hard work. You might do that because that is relating to the child with compassion. You're not really devastated that the sandcastle blew away, or that the house, someone was saying yesterday that their parents' house got burnt down. Now, of course, you're devastated when your parents' house gets burnt down, but you know it's all temporary and transient. But for that experience to be in samsara with wisdom, balancing your life out, you need to be able to empathize with the people that are really crying about their loss. You need to be able to feel with them. You can't balance them without feeling for them. Do you all understand? Just nod your heads if you understand what I'm saying. Okay, you are nodding your heads. Because it's so important. Because it's not, he says it's not about balancing with the mundane samsaric life is an illusion. But you do need to find a way of negotiating. And I think the story of the sandcastle is a beautiful way of negotiating, because you look at the child and you may even cry because the child's so upset that the sandcastle's gone. You know? And that's fine. You're not really crying in a devastated way that the sandcastle isn't there, that the house isn't there, that this isn't there. You're crying because you feel for that person. That's balance. That's using your wisdom, compassionate nature to help people, not putting your view onto them. Well, it's nothing. A sandcastle was going to blow away. Your house was temporary and transient. That's not useful to the person when they're going through a terrible time. Do you all understand what I'm saying? And Akong Rinpoche gives such beautiful, beautiful teachings. And he says, we created the imbalance in the first place. How did we create it? Number one, through our excessive activity, and our desire to have more and more and more. That's one of the reasons why we created the imbalance. Two, through not seeing the truth, he says. We don't see the truth. You know, people say to me after they've been in a relationship, for example, that really let them down. And they say to me, this young girl will say to me, I didn't see it. I didn't see what a bastard he was. I couldn't see it. I was so in love with who he was. I couldn't see it. Okay. He says through not seeing the truth. So that's an ego thing. This guy makes me feel wonderful right now. And that's all I can see. I can't see the truth that he's using me. He's abusing me. I'm going to be unhappy in the end. We don't see the truth. That's the second point of imbalance. And the third point, he says, is through not facing ourselves and the world, because we live in pretense. You know, people say, how are you? Oh, I'm just fine. I'm really fine. We don't look at it. We don't face the truth. So many people are like that. I look at them and I go, it's okay to feel like this. You can talk about it. It's okay. Just face the truth. Be there. Find the balance with it. Don't go down into the loophole and attach to your conditioning that things have to be okay. I hope this makes sense to you. Because you're all really listening, I know. But there's so much else. There's so much else. And I'm going to give it to you. We'll go on with it next week. We'll go on with part 2. And I'll send a note to all those who couldn't manage to be here tonight to please watch so that at least we can just carry on. Anyone want to say anything? Or are you all okay? Mimi, I know you're having trouble. And Marion, I never hear your voice, the other Marion, because I know that you keep quiet, but you've got so much to share. Any of you? Avril, Molly, Terry, Ika. Are you all okay? Pam,
Hi Mel.
hi Cooksey. Do you want to say
Uh,
anything?
Yeah, I just think that with the balance, it's nice to always use your wisdom. So with your body, your speech, your mind, whatever you're going through or you're doing or something in your day, just to come back to always using your wisdom. And like you say, all beings like have the potential to become enlightened. So you're always trying to develop that body bodhicitta on your outlook, like your compassion mind. And that also helps bring you back to the awareness.
Definitely. And that is so important because so many times people make mistakes. I see people making their mistakes over and over again. And in the past, I would have been so impatient with them. Now I understand that when you repeat something over and over again, and it's a mistake that lands you in real dire straits and real trouble because it makes you really unhappy. And I see that a lot of people can't really get out of it very quickly and very easily. I really see this a lot, and I understand it completely. And the harder it is to stop something that you are doing and some attachment that you've got, the longer that thing has been going on, because people see it from this life. It's from so many lifetimes, so many lifetimes. Sometimes people, and I'm really aware that a lot of people that I meet have got now in this degenerative age, that repetitious karma, something very deep that they're facing, something they've really got to come to terms with. It's such an important thing because so many of us are going through that. Not everybody, in fact, lots of people are going, but you can see it's an old habit or an old thing that now in this degenerative age, when you decide to wake up and become spiritual, it manifests in really ugly ways, but they're not really ugly. They really are your beautiful teacher. And we must really treasure them a lot. So let's
So,
dedicate. Yeah, please, you want
So
to
I really relate to what you're saying, especially because I feel like I'm living through a karmic, well, just what I'm living through is my reality is a long karmic imprint and habitual conditioning. And so, I mean, this idea of the balance is you know, I struggle enormously with it, finding that equilibrium. And when I do find it, it's like it's just for a moment and then it slips out of it. So my biggest challenge is that I often have the insight and awareness, but the follow through on that or staying in that is the part where I really fall down.
And
And
thank you for sharing that, because that is one of the most important things of why I've done this talk, because the harder it is to change, we all like that, not you, all of us. We have this beautiful insight and a great day, and we wake up and we've got all the resolutions we're going to do, and then we slip back. But that starts changing the minute you get the balance, and the minute you are in tune with your Buddha nature. The more you are in tune, the more you are aware, the easier it becomes to end something or finish something or get something off. This is so important because I know a lot of you are suffering with things like that. And it's really, this is very, very important. It does not come overnight, not because it's not there overnight, but because of all the eons of time we've been doing this, and we've covered it over and covered it over. So now we've got to clean out the muck so that we can get there. So we get there and then we fall straight back into the muck. And it's normal And in fact, it could be quite healthy because the lesson gets learned very, very deeply in the end. Think about that, because don't criticize yourselves. That's all I'm asking. Don't ever go into any of you, I'm so useless and I'll never get this right. None of that, because that's no balance. Because remember, your Buddha nature is totally and utterly able and perfect. And it's only the rubbish from all the karmic stuff that covers it over that we battle to get rid of and everything. The minute we see that Buddha nature, it dissolves straight away. Please understand this, all of you. So let's dedicate.
Mel,
sorry,
no camera. But what you were saying today, I think is so helpful, because when I look at people now, I try to think, okay, that's my look of them. I cannot see the full potentiality. I've got, let's say, that's my Melanie, the way I look at her. But there's a very, very greater picture in many, many aspects. And I think what's happening is there's a slight loosening, a slight opening up to the potentiality of different situations of people, a less thickening, a more opening. And that's what I think slowly, I would be thankful for.
And your devotion and your dedication to the Dharma is going to get you there. There is no doubt. You too, Avril, you too, Marion, all of you, Igor, all of you. Because absolutely, once you have this awareness, it's brilliant. I'm sorry we didn't have this discussion because it was a smaller group, but I'm happy to stay for any of you that want to ask. Let me dedicate so that those who really do have to leave now, I'm happy to give you a few minutes, because this is so important in all of your lives. But let's just dedicate to all sentient beings who are really struggling to find the balance and find the wisdom. And we've taken both those aspects, and we'll carry on with it next time. And may they all find that balance, and may they have that awakening, and may they suddenly have a breakthrough. And even if it goes back to the old, let them have a breakthrough again and again until it is finished. Through this merit, may we achieve all-seeing Buddhahood, and thereafter, once all harmful enemies have been defeated, may all beings be liberated from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Sonam die tamche zipane topne nepe dranam pamshene jegana chibala trupaye sipe sole doa dro warsho. So I'm happy to